Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to tell you a story. It is a story about magic. It is a story about a mouse, but mostly it is a story about a man who refused to give up. Do you know Disneyland? Of course you do. It is the most famous place on Earth. People call it the happiest place on Earth. When you go there today, you see beautiful castles, you see clean streets, you see happy families eating ice cream and meeting Mickey Mouse. But did you know that Disneyland almost didn't happen? In the beginning, everyone told Walt Disney he was crazy. They said, "Walt, you will lose all your money." They said, "Walt, nobody wants to go to an amusement park." Even his own wife, Lillian, was worried. She said, "Walt, why do you want to build an amusement park? They are dirty places." But Walt Disney had a dream. And today, we are going to learn how that dream became a reality. This is the story of the creation of Disneyland. Let's go back in time. The year is roughly 1940. Walt Disney was already a very famous man. He had created Mickey Mouse. He had made the movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He was successful, but he was also a father. Walt had two young daughters. Their names were Diane and Sharon. On the weekends, Saturday was Daddy's Day. Walt loved to take his daughters out to have fun. Usually, they went to places like local carnivals or fairs. In the 1940s, amusement parks were very different from today. They were not nice places. Imagine this. The ground was covered in dirt and trash. The ride operators looked grumpy. Their uniforms were dirty. The food was not safe to eat. Walt would sit on a hard wooden bench. He would eat peanuts and wait. He watched his daughters ride the merry-go-round. The merry-go-round went around and around. The girls were happy, but Walt was bored. He looked around the park. He saw trash on the ground. He saw parents who looked tired and unhappy. He thought to himself, "This is not right." Walt thought, "Why is there no place where parents and children can have fun together? Usually, the kids played and the adults watched." Walt wanted a place that was clean, a place that was safe, a place where a father could ride a boat with his daughter and both of them would smile. He took out a piece of paper. He started to draw. He didn't want a carnival, he wanted something new. He called it a theme park. This was the spark. This was the beginning of the biggest idea in entertainment history. But having an idea is easy. Building it, that is very, very hard. He wanted to build a small park across the street from his movie studio in Burbank, California. He called it Mickey Mouse Park. He planned to have a few statues of Mickey and Donald Duck, maybe a small train ride, a nice place for people to sit and relax. Walt started to write letters to people. He visited museums and other parks. He wanted to learn everything. He looked at how people moved in crowds. He looked at what people liked to eat. But then the idea started to grow. Walt realized that a small park across the street was not enough. He had too many ideas. He wanted a jungle, he wanted a castle, he wanted a spaceship. The small piece of land near the studio was too small. He needed space, a lot of space. So Walt hired a special team. He called them Imagineers. This is a mix of two words, imagination and engineering. He told them, "Find me a place to build my dream." They looked all over California. Finally, they found it. It was a place called Anaheim. In the 1950s, Anaheim was not a city. It was countryside. It was full of orange trees, thousands and thousands of orange trees. Walt bought 160 acres of land. That is huge. It is like 120 football fields. He said, "This is it. We will build it here." But there was one big problem, a very big problem. Money. Walt Disney did not have enough money. Yes, he was famous, but in the movie business, you spend a lot of money to make a movie. Walt often put all his money into his next project. To build Disneyland, he needed millions of dollars. In 1953, he needed about $17 million. In today's money, that is hundreds of millions. He went to the banks. He went to New York to talk to the rich bankers. Imagine the scene. Walt walks into a big fancy office. He puts his drawings on the table. He shows them the castle. He shows them the pirate ship. He says, "I want to build a magical place." The bankers looked at him. They looked at the drawings, and they laughed. One banker said, "Mr. Disney, the outdoor amusement business is dying. Nobody goes to parks anymore. You should stick to making movies." Another banker said, "This is a fantasy. It will fail." Walt went to almost every bank. Everyone said no. Walt was desperate. He even borrowed money from his own life insurance. He sold his vacation home. He was risking everything. If Disneyland failed, Walt Disney would lose everything. He would be poor. He needed a miracle, and that miracle came from a new invention: television. In the early 1950s, TV was very new. Most movie studios hated TV. They thought TV would steal their audience. They refused to put their movies on TV. But Walt was smart. He saw an opportunity. The TV network ABC was new and struggling. They needed a big show. Walt went to ABC and made a deal. He said, "I will make a TV show for you every week, but you must lend me the money to build my park." ABC said yes. This changed everything. Walt got the money, and he also got a TV show called Disneyland. Every week, millions of families watched the show. On the show, Walt talked about the park. He showed them the maps. He showed them the construction. He was advertising the park before it was even built. The whole country started to get excited. Every child in America wanted to go to Disneyland. Now, Walt had the money, he had the land, the orange groves in Anaheim, but he did not have time. He told his team, "We must open in 1 year." 1 year! To build a city of magic in 1 year is impossible. They had to cut down the orange trees. They had to build mountains. They had to dig rivers. They had to build a castle. The construction site was chaotic. It was full of dust and noise. Walt was there every day. He wore an old hat and work boots. He knew every detail. One day, he was looking at a ride called the Jungle Cruise. It was a boat ride through a fake jungle. The workers were building the river. Walt looked at the trees. He said, "The trees are too short. It doesn't look like a real jungle." The gardener said, "Walt, trees take years to grow." Walt said, "I don't have years. Put the correct trees in." So they went around California and bought huge, full-grown trees from people's backyards. They moved them to Disneyland and planted them. It was instant magic. Walt was very specific. He wanted the castle to be tall, so they used a trick. They made the bricks at the top of the castle smaller than the bricks at the bottom. This is called forced perspective. It makes the building look taller than it really is. He wanted the birds in the tiki room to sing and move, but robots didn't really exist yet. So his team used cables, air pressure, and magnets. They invented audio animatronics. But as the opening day got closer, things were going wrong. They were running out of money again. They were running out of time. Workers were working 24 hours a day. Just one day before the opening, the asphalt, the black road material, on Main Street was still soft. It hadn't dried yet. The paint on the Mark Twain riverboat was still wet. Would they finish in time? July 17th, 1955, the big day. Walt invited important people, reporters, and celebrities for a special preview. It was supposed to be a happy day. But in Disney history, this day is known as Black Sunday. Why? Because it was a disaster. First, it was hot, extremely hot. It was 101 degrees Fahrenheit, about 38 degrees Celsius. It was a heat wave. Remember the asphalt on Main Street? It was still soft from the heat. Ladies wore high-heeled shoes. Their shoes sank into the street. They got stuck in the road. Second, there were too many people. Walt invited 11,000 people, but 28,000 people showed up. Many people climbed over the fence or used fake tickets. The park was overcrowded. Third, the food ran out. The drinks ran out. People were thirsty and angry. And then the plumber strike. A few weeks before opening, the plumbers told Walt, "We can finish the toilets or we can finish the drinking fountains, but we cannot finish both." Walt said, "People can buy Pepsi, but they cannot pee in the street. Finish the toilets." So, on the hottest day of the year, there were no water fountains. People thought Walt did this on purpose to sell more soda. It made them very angry. The gas leaked in Fantasyland. They had to close the land. The Mark Twain boat was too heavy with people. It almost sank in the water. Walt Disney was running around the park. He was trying to fix everything. He looked tired. He thought he had failed. The newspapers the next day called it a nightmare. Was the dream over? The day after Black Sunday, the reviews were bad. Journalists wrote that the park was a nightmare. Walt read the newspapers. He didn't get angry. He got to work. He immediately called his team. He said, "Invite the press back. Give them a private tour. Treat them like kings." He fixed the plumbing. The water fountains started working. He ordered more food. He fixed the soft asphalt on Main Street. Walt realized that the biggest problem was the crowds. He needed to control how many people entered the park. So they improved the ticket system. Slowly, the bad news turned into good news. People came back, and they loved it. They had never seen anything like it. Remember, in 1955, the outside world was often dirty and chaotic. But inside the gates of Disneyland, Everything was perfect. The streets were clean. The staff was friendly. The flowers were beautiful. It was like stepping into a movie. By the end of the first week, almost 160,000 people had visited. By the end of the first year, 3.6 million people had walked through the castle. The bankers who said no to Walt were wrong. Disneyland was not losing money. It was making millions. It became the most popular travel destination in America. Kings, queens, and presidents came to visit. If you were a celebrity, you had to go to Disneyland. Now, let me explain something interesting about how people paid for rides back then. It is very different from today. Today, you pay one big price at the gate and you can ride everything. But in the 1950s, the entrance fee was very cheap. It was only about $1. But inside the park, you had to buy tickets for every single ride. Walt introduced a ticket book. It was a book of paper coupons. The coupons were labeled A, B, C, D, and E. A tickets were for small things, like the horse-drawn streetcars. C tickets were for bigger rides, like the teacups. E tickets, these were the special ones. The E ticket was for the best, most exciting rides. It was for the Jungle Cruise, the Rocket to the Moon, and later, the submarines. Even today in America, older people use the phrase, an E-ticket ride. It means an experience that is thrilling and exciting. This phrase comes from Disneyland. This system made Disney a lot of money. People always wanted more e-tickets. But Walt was not interested in keeping the money. He wanted to spend it. He had a philosophy. He called it plussing. Plus it. This meant make it better. Never stop improving. If a ride was good, Walt asked, how can we make it better? He told his Imagineers, Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world. And he proved it with his next big inventions. In 1959, just 4 years after opening, Walt wanted a mountain. He didn't just want a hill. He wanted a snowy mountain in the middle of sunny California. He called it the Matterhorn. He wanted a roller coaster inside the mountain, but standard roller coasters were bumpy and loud. They were made of wood. Walt wanted something smooth. He wanted it to feel like a bobsled on ice. His engineers invented a new type of track. They used tubular steel pipes. This allowed the coaster to bend and turn smoothly. This is important. Virtually every modern roller coaster in the world today uses this tubular steel design. Disney invented it for the Matterhorn. In the same year, 1959, Walt introduced the monorail. It was a sleek, futuristic train that ran on a single beam. It looked like a spaceship. Walt saw a monorail in Germany and brought the idea to America. It was the first daily operating monorail in the Western Hemisphere. Walt also built a submarine ride. He actually created a navy of submarines. At one point, people joked that Walt Disney had the 8th largest submarine fleet in the world. Disneyland was a technological marvel. It wasn't just a park, it was a city of the future. But while everything inside the park was perfect, Walt was looking outside the gates, and he did not like what he saw. Let's look at a map of Anaheim in 1955 versus 1960. In 1955, Disneyland was surrounded by orange trees. It was quiet. But because Disneyland was so popular, other businesses wanted to be near it. Cheap hotels, fast food restaurants, and tacky souvenir shops sprang up all around Disneyland. They built right up to the edge of Walt's property. There were bright neon signs, there were ugly buildings. Walt hated it. Imagine this. You are inside Disneyland. You are in Tomorrowland, looking at the future. But if you look up, you see a cheap motel sign right outside the fence. It ruins the magic. Walt felt trapped. He said, "I made a mistake. I didn't buy enough land." He controlled everything inside the park, but he could not control anything outside the park. He told his friends, "If I could do it again, I would buy so much land that people couldn't see the outside world." This regret started to grow in his mind. Walt was now in his 60s. He was a grandfather. Most men his age were retiring. They were playing golf. But Walt was restless. He was bored with just making movies. He was even a little bored with Disneyland. He wanted a new challenge. He started to look at a map of the United States. He looked east. He wanted a place with good weather. He wanted a place with cheap land. And most importantly, he wanted a place with privacy. This next part of the story sounds like a spy movie. Walt Disney decided to build a second park. But this would not just be a park, it would be a resort, a kingdom. He chose Central Florida. It was a place full of swamps, alligators, and cows. There was nothing there. But he had to be very careful. Think about it. If people knew Walt Disney was buying land, the price would skyrocket. If a farmer knew Mickey Mouse wanted his field, he would ask for millions of dollars. So Walt used a secret identity. In 1964 and 1965, strange men in suits appeared in Florida. They started buying land. They bought thousands of acres. They did not say they were from Disney. They used fake company names. They used names like MT Lot Real Estate. If you say it fast, it sounds like empty lot. Retlaw Enterprises. Retlaw is Walter spelled backward. They bought land for very cheap prices, sometimes just $180 an acre. The locals were confused. Who were these mystery buyers? Why were they buying useless swampland? Rumors started to fly. Some people said it was the Ford Motor Company. Some people said it was the Kennedy family. Some people even said it was the mafia. By the time the secret came out, Walt Disney had bought 27,000 acres of land. That is 43 square miles. It is twice the size of the island of Manhattan. It is the size of San Francisco. He had enough land to hold all his dreams. He could build hotels, golf courses, airports, and parks. And nobody could build a cheap motel next to his castle. He called it the Florida Project. Later, it would be named Disney World. But Walt had a secret within a secret. Everyone thought he was just building another Disneyland in Florida, a bigger theme park. But that was not the real reason Walt bought the land. The theme park was just a way to make money. Walt's real dream was something much stranger, something much more ambitious. He wanted to build a real city, a utopian city, a city where people actually lived. He called it EPCOT. Wait, EPCOT? You might know EPCOT as a theme park with a big silver ball, but that is not what Walt intended. EPCOT stood for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Walt was tired of how messy American cities were. They were dirty, traffic was bad, and they were disorganized. Walt thought, I know how to build things better than city planners. He spent all his time in late 1966 working on this. He filmed a movie explaining the idea to the world. He looked old in the movie, but his eyes were bright. He was excited. But there was something Walt didn't tell the public. He was sick, very sick. While he was drawing plans for the city of tomorrow, he was dying. It was late 1966. Walt Disney was working hard on the Florida project, but his staff noticed something. Walt was coughing. He looked pale. He was in pain. Walt had been a heavy smoker his whole life. He finally went to the doctor. The news was bad. It was lung cancer. He went into the hospital. Even in his hospital bed, Walt was dreaming. His brother Roy came to visit him. Walt asked Roy to raise the bed. He pointed to the ceiling tiles. The ceiling had square tiles, like a grid. Walt used the grid to design his city. He said, Roy, look, this square is the center. This is where the monorail goes. This is where the people live. Until his very last breath, he was planning. He was imagining a better future. On December 15, 1966, the light went out. Walt Disney died. The whole world was shocked. The man who gave us Mickey Mouse, Snow White, and Mary Poppins was gone. But for the Disney Company, it was not just sad, it was terrifying. Walt was the creative genius. He was the one with the ideas. Without him, what would happen to the Florida project? What would happen to EPCOT? Everyone looked at his brother, Roy Disney. Roy Disney was 73 years old. He wanted to retire. He wanted to go fishing and spend time with his grandchildren. Roy was the money man. For 40 years, Walt had the crazy ideas, and Roy found the money to pay for them. They often fought, but they loved each other. Now, Walt was gone. The board of directors wanted to stop the Florida project. They said, without Walt, we cannot build a futuristic city. It is too risky. Roy stood up. He postponed his retirement. He said, we are going to finish this project. We are going to do it for Walt. However, Roy was practical. He knew he couldn't build the functional city of tomorrow, EPCOT, right away. The technology wasn't ready. So Roy changed the plan. He decided to build the theme park first, the Magic Kingdom. It would be like Disneyland, but bigger and better. And he made one very important change. The project was called Disney World. Roy changed the name. He officially renamed it Walt Disney World. He said, I want everyone to know that this was Walt's dream. Building in California was hard. Building in Florida was a nightmare. The land was a swamp. It was wet, muddy, and full of insects and alligators. When you dug a hole, it immediately filled with water. So how do you build a castle on a swamp? The engineers had a brilliant idea. They did not dig down, they built up. This is one of the most famous secrets of Disney World. When you walk down Main Street in the Magic Kingdom, you think you are on the ground level. You are not. You are actually on the second floor. The ground floor is underneath your feet. Remember how Walt hated seeing a cowboy in Tomorrowland? He didn't want the workers to walk through the wrong lands. He wanted them to be invisible. So, Roy and the engineers built a massive system of tunnels called utilidors, utility corridors. Imagine a huge underground city. There are cafeterias, dressing rooms, and hair salons for the staff, called cast members. There are garbage chutes that suck trash through pipes at 60 miles per hour. They built these tunnels on top of the swamp. Then they covered the tunnels with millions of tons of dirt. They built the park on top of the dirt. So, the Magic Kingdom is actually a giant rooftop garden. This was a massive engineering challenge. It took years. It took 9,000 workers. But Roy pushed them forward. He wanted to open it before he died. October 1, 1971. 5 years after Walt died, Walt Disney World opened its gates. It was spectacular. The castle, Cinderella Castle, was much taller than the one in California. The resort had hotels, beaches, and golf courses. It was a true vacation kingdom. Roy Disney stood on a podium in Town Square. He was 78 years old. He looked tired and frail, but he was smiling. He read a speech dedicating the park to his brother. He asked his wife, "Lily, you knew everything Walt wanted. Did we do it right?" She looked at the castle and said, "Roy, it is perfect. Walt would have loved it." Roy's job was done. He had kept his promise. Just 2 months after the park opened, in December 1971, Roy Disney died. It was as if he held on just long enough to finish the dream. The two brothers were together again. After Roy died, the company continued to grow. In 1982, they finally opened EPCOT. It was not the city to live in that Walt wanted. It was a theme park about technology and world culture, but it still kept the spirit of innovation. Later came Disney's Hollywood Studios and Disney's Animal Kingdom. Disney World became the biggest single-site employer in the United States. The dream crossed the oceans. Tokyo Disneyland opened in 1983. Disneyland Paris opened in 1992. Then came Hong Kong and Shanghai. The company bought Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars. They built cruise ships. They built a streaming service. Today, the Walt Disney Company is an entertainment giant. But if you strip away the movies, the merchandise, and the billions of dollars, you find the simple truth at the center. Why does this story matter? Why do we care about the creation of an amusement park? It matters because it shows the power of belief. Walt Disney had every reason to quit. He had no money. The bankers laughed at him. His industry mocked him. Even nature fought him with swamps and heat waves. But he had a vision. He wanted to create happiness. Walt once said a very famous quote, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." When you look at Disneyland today, you don't see the struggle. You don't see the panic of Black Sunday. You don't see the dirt of the construction sites. You only see the magic. So, the next time you have a dream that seems too big or a project that seems too hard, Remember the orange groves in Anaheim. Remember the swamp in Florida. Remember that everything big starts small. Walt Disney famously said, "I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse. But really, it was started by a man who refused to give up." Thank you for joining me on this journey through history. I hope this story inspires you to build your own castles. If you learned some new English words today, please like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Goodbye for now and have a magical day.